We couldn't let this evening pass without really taking advantage of having Mathias Doepfner and General Scowcroft here and chatting with them a little bit. And I know that this is what's keeping you from your trip home, but I think it's worth spending 15 minutes or so just in a brief conversation with both of you. And General Scowcroft, I'd like to start with you. You were reflecting a little bit on those historic moments over 25 years ago at this point. When did you know that you were a witness to history in the making?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not sure when, because there were a number of surprises along the way. I guess I would say the first prize was in the year of upheaval in Eastern Europe, and a little bit in East Germany as well. East Germany celebrated its 40th anniversary, and Gorbachev went. And I always thought that would be a real mark of where the Germans were. Would he shore up the government? Would he walk away, and so on? I thought he would shore up the government to try to gain whatever he could back from the uprisings in Europe. He didn't. And that gave me the first indication that maybe this would go through.
Mathias Doepfner, in the video that was put together to tee up your remarks, there were some segments from a 1971 interview with Axel Springer. And on a number of levels, I was impressed with his vision and foresight. Of course, he never witnessed a reunited Germany. He passed away just a few years before German unification took place. What do you think he would think of Germany today and how things have evolved over the last 25 years?
Probably he would still be alive had he experienced this reunification, which was the dream of his life. He was a true visionary. He always believed in that, in a peaceful reunification, reunification that represents freedom and democracy. So he believed in that against all odds, against a consensus in Germany that the idea of a German reunification is reactionary, is leading to a new nationalist Germany. I mean, we forget about this. Today, in retrospect, it all looks obvious. It was the opposite of being obvious. I remember when I was at university in Frankfurt, there was a seminar about the German question. And the simple fact that you would ask the German question, which means that one day a reunification could be a realistic scenario, was seen as a kind of reactionary nationalist statement. And everybody, almost everybody, was against it. Axel Springer was fighting for it, very isolated. He believed in it. And I think the fact that we achieved it is mainly thanks to the United States. Without George Bush, without your support behind the scenes, it wouldn't have happened. Mitterrand was against it, Thatcher was against it, and large parts of the German public were against it. So thanks to very few visionaries and the tremendous support of the Americans, who saved Berlin and Germany after the Second World War and basically helped to reunify Germany, it wouldn't have happened.
And let me shift back to General Scowcroft as a keen observer of global affairs, but certainly the transatlantic relationship. I think to pick up on what you were saying, Mathias Doepfner, we're now standing with 2 feet in the 21st century. It's a very different time. General Scowcroft, what have been some of the things that have surprised you about how Germany has developed, how the transatlantic relationship has evolved over the last 25 years?
Well, I've been surprised because I thought it would not be an easy job to reunify Germany. The Germans helped a great deal. The first election that the two Germanys had together was instructive. I thought that it likely would either be communist in East Germany and something in West Germany, or socialist in both as the closest they could come. In fact, the Christian Democrats won in both. And that simply astonished me. It made the whole unification easier because the political process had something to work with. And I still think it was a little short of a miracle that things moved so easily and so clearly in the same direction. We didn't have to do much of anything. The only real issue was how much Helmut Kohl would pay for the East German mark.
I think in many ways, the 2+4 agreement set a foundation for this post-Cold War world that people have reflected on and thought about. And much in the same way, I think we're in the midst of a negotiation, like the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership negotiations, but we're also in a different age, the digital era that affects your work, that can be game changers, much in the same way as German unity has been a game changer, certainly for Europe and for the rest of the world. Mathias Doepfner, you reflected in your remarks about some of the big global challenges and how they affect the transatlantic relationship. But I'd like to ask each of you to reflect a little bit on the trade-off between privacy and security, given your experience as the National Security Advisor to two presidents, but also, Mathias Doepfner, your experience at the head of a major media company. I think each of you might have some unique insights to this trade-off between privacy and security in a digital age.
I don't know how to answer that.
Okay, me neither, but I try.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I think the TTIP is a very important project. We have to do everything to get it done. I hope that Congress is going to make the right decision. I think it's crucial, and it really is going to provide level playing fields, and it's going to bring the allies closer together. I think it's absolutely important. This aspect and that element that you have mentioned, privacy data, that is really one of the strange, somehow, differences between America and Europe, or America and Germany, and sometimes it's hard to understand, and I can only imagine that the devil is in the detail here, because in the general idea that a free society needs certain limitations of data transparency seems to be to me so obvious, but the difference here may come from two very different cultural experiences. You could say that the self-defining moment of recent history in America is 9/11. And the learning from 9/11 is that you should do almost everything in order to avoid that such an act of terror is going to happen again. And the price that you have to pay for that is full transparency of data and privacy, Patriot Act. That's the trauma and the lesson the Americans learned. The historic trauma of Europe and Germany is the Holocaust. And the learning of the Holocaust is that total transparency of data and privacy leads to concentration camps and people that get tattooed with numbers before they are going to the gas chambers. So basically, two very different learnings from history. And I think we have to bring it together. I mean, definitely, the truth is in the middle. Total transparency is totalitarian, and a kind of neurotic relationship towards data and disclosure of certain elements of privacy is also going to lead into the wrong direction. So we have to find a compromise.
But I think this is a great example and a great reminder of the fact that history matters.
Absolutely.
And that's part of the reason, General Scowcroft, why it's so wonderful to have you with us today as well.
History does matter, but in strange ways. I, for example, was strongly against the 2+4 negotiating arrangement, the 2 being the 2 Germanys and the 4 being the occupying powers. Because look at the 4. Of the 4, only the United States was supporting German unification. The British Prime Minister said, I like Germany so much, I think there ought to be 2 of them. Gorbachev clearly was, the French were quiescent, but clearly against German reunification. Obviously, the Russians were. How did it happen? It's amazing to me.
And that's why we're celebrating it
Yes.
today. So perhaps, Mathias Doepfner, a closing question to you about a current topic that I know is of interest to many people in the room. Just last week, the top European court struck down a 15-year-old agreement known as the Safe Harbor. And this had allowed the free flow of information across the Atlantic. The decision by the European Court of Justice raises major questions for businesses and how they conduct their business. And negotiations could be protracted for quite a while. This leads to a great deal of uncertainty for those businesses. Do you have any thoughts or recommendations on how companies can navigate the current situation as a result of this decision?
I can be very brief, no.
Okay.
No, I mean, seriously, this is definitely an issue that has to be discussed in detail, and we have to find solutions. The only thing that I can say, I think the general idea that there also here, we need certain rules about how to deal with data and which data are shared with whom, under which circumstances. I think that's a fair discussion. We have to have that discussion. I strongly believe, and I really hope, that this discussion is not harming the whole TTIP outcome, because it is so essential that we get that.
Well, obviously, there's a lot more that we could be talking about, and certainly some of these themes are themes that we'll be dealing with for quite a while, and I hope that you both know that you have an open forum at the American Council on Germany, and that we would welcome you back to help spark discussion around many of these issues. Now let me just thank you both for being with us this evening, and to all of you, thank you for being here as well, and Bob, let me invite you up to the podium to close out the night.